proper homicide investigative protocols. And the objective of this will be to understand a systematic approach to homicide investigations. Okay. The importance of this and the reason to understand that is to ensure justice for victims and families. And it also maintains public trust in law enforcement. Okay. And then the third prong that it does is it upholds legal and ethical standards. So when you're on the stand and you're talking about this stuff, okay, that you have to recognize the defense is doing their job and the prosecution is doing their job on behalf of who? The families and the victims. That is who the state represents. In this case, I would scream there's a conflict of interest because the university got into the chain of discussion that, in my opinion, compromised communication that ensured justice for the victims and the families. And this is why you had a 50-50 split from the families and not 100% buy-in in this latest plea deal. So the overview that I want to go over today are the key steps and what has been shown to be the best practices and how you overcome the challenges of them. So initially, I want to go through three things. How, the security of the scene was critical. Whoops. I just hit the wrong thing. Okay. And establishing a perimeter to preserve evidence. And this is fundamental 101, and restrict access to authorized personnel. Okay, a few things that now I want to jump into the documents. This is Homicide 101. Establish a perimeter, preserve evidence, restrict access to authorized personnel. The second piece of this, when anybody goes into a homicide, i.e. detectives, their second responsibility is to ensure safety. Okay. So you want to check for suspects, immediate threats, which the documents are clear, and then provide any medical aid if needed. This is why the dispatcher was on the phone saying, you have an unconscious person in there. What is going on? That's a responsibility of that dispatcher to establish life or death. And if there's life, then they have to give life-saving measures on the phone to the people who are calling. And then the third piece of this is document initial observations. So, a couple of things have happened here in this case as of the last couple of weeks. And here's what I mean by that. Hang on for a minute.
What are we looking at, Chris?
I'm taking this down and I'm putting this up. Okay. Okay. So first of all, this is the very first document that the public ever saw. And in this document, the lead investigator for Moscow Police Department was right there in highlight, Corporal Payne, and that he was being assisted by members of the Idaho State Police. He was being assisted by the Idaho State Police. And who? Agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Guess what? They were ISP and FBI were not the lead on this case. Now that Brian Koberger has been adjudicated, his case, ISP lieutenant has become the lead investigator. I'm going to ask the question, why is that happening? Is Corporal Payne no longer the guy who wrote this affidavit for the world to see as the case agent with your assistance, ISP and FBI? The FBI hasn't said anything. They're going back saying, hey, we did A, B, C, and D, but we're not saying we're the lead investigators. So as we go through this tonight, I want to know why ISP, who, by the way, is a state agency, state school, both under the governor's office. Okay? Because down here, it was Payne who said, based on the above information, I am requesting an arrest warrant. If the lieutenant was the lead investigator, he would have requested the arrest warrant. That is the proper chain of custody and chain of events, period. And a defense attorney, if you don't put it out that way, will ask the same questions I'm asking to both of those individuals.
It also seems like, for, again, going back to this PR narrative that the state and the university seem to be pushing, is that, so they have the state lieutenant, the ISP, Idaho State Police lieutenant, out there giving the interviews now, post event. And Payne is not even there. He's off the stage. And again, Chris, to your point, why? He was not the main lead investigator in all this. So they push him out, and now they've got this lieutenant giving absolutely PR answers to questions. These are not straightforward answers. We're going to show some of the videos. So if you haven't seen it yet, you'll know what we're talking about.
Yes.
It's not just a bad look. It raises a lot of questions. Who's running the show behind the scenes here on the PR aspect now that the case is over?
Well, we know who ran the show in the beginning because it's in their book. It's in their book. We just read the paragraphs where they were preparing all of the talking points and how to handle the media before any of this really got as big as it did. I'm going to submit to you, this is just my opinion, that hasn't changed. That has not changed. Okay. So let's think about then homicide 101. Okay. You secure the scene, ensure safety, document all initial observations. All right. So now let's go to the first officer on the scene and find out just a couple of things. Now, it's not necessary for me to go through and describe the victim's injuries, et cetera. Well, that's for another day. The families have suffered enough. There's enough going on there. However, this is one of the officers on the scene, okay, Officer Nunes. He was one of the first guys there. Actually, he is the first guy there. Here, when he gets there, proper police procedure is when you roll up on a homicide and the victims are outside and they say, hey, our friends are dead upstairs, second floor. Immediately you turn to them and you say, don't move, stay right here. I'll be right back. And then you get on the radio and the cavalry starts showing up. And you start moving in there to verify if something's going on. Well, in this case, we see that he's seeing the victims, okay? But we're also seeing that Hunter went right behind him and actually went behind both officers because they turn and they tell him to leave the knife and go back downstairs to the front entrance. So number one, control of the scene almost immediately was not happening. That usually happens because of training and emotion. Everybody's responding to the emotion, i.e. the officers, because we're human beings. Then this idea that says command and control, command presence is what it's called. They're taught this in the academy. And this comes from experience with many officers. Thousands of officers will tell you the exact same thing I'm telling you here. You tell that individual, that RP, the reporting party, wait here, do not leave. I got to make sure there aren't other people in the building. And then you go. Well, somebody lost control of that scene almost immediately because Hunter was right behind them. And the cop recognized it, Officer Nunes, and to his credit, he immediately escorted him and told him, get back downstairs. Okay. Well, the second officer, Warner, actually took him downstairs, back downstairs. Okay. So when we talk about the front entrance, we're talking about the front door where the cops went in and they went up to the second floor, saw the victims there, and then they went up to the third floor and saw the victims there. All right. So now, once the scene is secured, the next piece of this is you have to start control points because there's now evidence collection that's going to take place. Okay. You also want to start conversations, i.e. interviews with the victims or the witnesses or the potential victims, potential witnesses, potential suspects. You don't know what you have or who you have it from, okay, when you're talking to people. So if you're talking to a Dylan, for an example, and she says, hey, by the way, I saw a guy there at 4 a.m, okay, and he went out the slider, then that's critical information. So in this case, staying with that document, the officer went back to start working on the search warrant. And when he came back, okay, at approximately 4:28 in the afternoon, he started to assist with security around the southwest patio entrance. Okay. Ann Taylor would have had a field day with this information. Okay. And here's why. This is a southwest corner patio entry log. Whenever you establish a point of entry, i.e. control, which that was the slide I just showed, control the scene, okay, that is the way the investigators go in and the investigators go out. The forensic people go in, the forensic people come out, the DA goes in, etc. Okay. 90% of the time, you don't want the district attorney in there until all your evidence collection has occurred. So in this case, what did they do? Okay. They established the point of entry into the crime scene at the same exit the suspect went out of, the sliding glass patio door.
So obviously, Chris, that is an evidence contamination issue, correct?
And why do you think she was screaming the footprints and all this other stuff? Okay. They don't know at the I would submit to you that somebody read this report and said, wait a minute, what were we doing? Or somebody came to the scene and saw what they were doing and said, time out. We're out of here. Let's go down to the front. And guess what? At that time, at 3:17, Corporal Lanier came through that door. At 3:20, Officer Warner arrived to relieve Officer Smith. At 4:28, Nunes arrives. At 5:09, Gunderson exits through that door. At 5:10, Corporal Payne, Smith, ISP Detective Talbot, and Prosecutor Ashley Jones exited that door. At 5:11, Corporal Payne, Smith, ISP Detective Talbot, Prosecutor Ashley Jenkins entered that door. They came out for a minute and they went in a minute later. Through the exact door they claimed the suspect left. At 5:48, Officer Morris is relieved. At 9:15 in the evening, they realize, oh crap, we should secure and lock, i.e. seal, this door. Now, nobody's talking about this because I guess they don't want to. I don't know. But I want to be honest to the victims and to the families. That is slide number 1 that I showed. And my integrity is to be 100% transparent with what we're looking at here. Okay. Now, I'm not going to make very many friends sometimes on the LE side, but that's okay. You know, why we do this and why they do this is to have an after action report and say, did we make mistakes? And that's how you answer the public. When a presser says, hey, what happened? Okay. You don't take the public to a statement like this.
Always be nice to have an answer to everything, but the reality is that we don't always have that luxury.
You do have the answer. It's a matter of whether or not you want to follow the bullet points and the talking points to the public. You have the answer. And it's your responsibility to tell the world what that is.